Thanks again for tuning into this workshop. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. So today, this might be a controversial review because we are reviewing Alchemised. I say it might be controversial because there was a lot of controversy about the book when it came out because I think the publisher had to renege on some of how they were marketing the book. They were and they weren't marketing it as a Hermione retelling, and considering, all of the drama going on with, valid drama by the way, with J.K. Rowling and her transphobia, everyone was equating pretty much anything that was Hermione related or Hermione inspired as supporting the Harry Potter IP. So there was a lot of controversy with it. I work at a bookstore, so I heard about a lot of the controversy. This book was not on my TBR, and then I got it with my Fairy Loot subscription box. I'm like, okay, so Fairy Loot has yet to steer me wrong. They have yet, with their monthly subscriptions, they have yet to steer me wrong. I have yet to read a monthly. There's a reason I'm specifying. There's a reason that I have yet to read a monthly book and not be, disappointed in it. It just wasn't on my TBR because I had no interest in reading Manacled. And this book is her version of Manacled, which was Harry Potter, alternate history, retelling Hermione with Handmaid's Tale elements in it, It was a reinterpretation of a story she's already written, which, props to her for taking the time to rewrite a 1,000-page book. I struggle with just rewriting chapters. But I guess, she had the time to do it, thanks to the publisher. But they really should have changed how they marketed it from the get-go. Because they were also saying, romantasy. And that's how people were kind of categorizing it. It's not romantasy. And let me just specify that. It's not romantasy at all. It is very much, and I understand why the author was really pressuring it like, no, it's not romantasy. It's not. It is just clearly dark fantasy with some romantic elements to it. I think nowadays when people just say, oh, there's romance in the fantasy, it's romantasy, that's not the case, You can have fantasy with some romance in it, but the romance is not the core of the story. When the romance is the core of the story, then it is a romance with fantasy, and then that would be romantasy. This one very much is a dark fantasy with some romantic elements in it. And the romantic elements don't develop until way into the book. You're reading it for the war. You're reading it for the characterization, which I do think the characterization is really well done. I think the pacing is really well done. However, that being said, I had some issues with the pacing only because of the alchemy aspect. I love alchemy. I think alchemy is such a fascinating subcategory of magic that is very underutilized. You don't really get to see it explored a lot in fantasy. Usually it's just, magic, potions, all that fun stuff. But I think alchemy itself is a very, very interesting concept. I've always had a fascination with alchemy. Not as much as my friend Jeff, but I do have a fascination with alchemy. So that part of the story was very interesting to me. However, that being said, there were some times where it was a little dense, the alchemy parts, and sometimes a little repetitive. I can forgive the repetitiveness because it's a 1,000-page book, and the author's thinking like, well, maybe they forgot. And I do like that consideration. Or maybe she forgot that she spoke about this aspect of alchemy like probably 200, 300 pages before, right? I don't mind the reiteration of it because I think a lot of readers probably, won't remember, right? Just because there's a lot happening in the book. Not to say that that's a bad thing, but I personally found it, I'm like, okay, you already talked about this. Let's move on. You already said this exact kind of same thing, going this in depth with this part of alchemy earlier on. Like, come on, just, you know, I don't need the complete rehash again. Personally, I did not. Maybe some readers did. I personally did not, and that's what was detrimental to me reading the story. I think it did not need to be 1,000 pages. I don't mind long books. I really don't. I get annoyed when long books feel long. And there were times when this book was feeling a little long because it got a little dense. You know, the whole of part 2, oh my god, part 2 was phenomenal. I blew through part 2. I think part 2, like the whole her remembering everything, I think that was like absolutely amazing. I have absolutely no complaints, no notes about part 2. But part 1, that first chapter was rough. The prologue, it almost made me not want to continue reading the book. But thank God after that, it picks up the pace. And it's just really those parts. I like the world building. I know a lot of people think that there wasn't a lot of world building, but I do think that the author did a really good job of separating Alchemised from Manacled. Again, I have not read Manacled, but I do think she did a good job of separating this from the Harry Potter universe entirely. And that's what I liked about it. I'm a Harry Potter fan. You know, Harry Potter helped me out of a lot of depression when I was younger. I'm manic depressive. So Harry Potter is just kind of what got me out of the darkness, you know? So it's always going to be dear to my heart. No, I don't agree with some of the best people I love in my life are trans. So I definitely don't agree. And it's so hard for me because just like, oh God, I'm rereading the books, just, you know, skimming through them. I'm like, how are you the same person? You know, that's a discussion for another day. But, you know, it's always going to mean something very personal to me, Harry Potter. So I personally do see a lot of the parallels with Harry Potter, but even for me, it's like stretching. Like, you can definitely be like, oh, that person was meant to be this person. You know, clearly she drew inspiration from HP. Authors draw inspiration from a lot of things, you know, and I don't think that's a good enough reason to not read the book, only because she does a very good job of separating this book from that entirely. Like, this is her own story. These are her characters. Very much like, yes, you can say like, oh, this character is kind of inspired, just character dynamic wise, but they very much are her own characters. And I really like that and I respect that. I do think it's a really interesting story. Even my husband, who he reads more nonfiction nowadays than he does fantasy, but he grew up on that stuff. I told him the concept of the book, you know, magical kind of realm with Handmaid's Tale. He's like, oh, that's actually sounds really, really interesting. And I'm like, right, it's a really fascinating idea. It's a very fascinating concept. But as much as she drew inspiration from, you know, that which will not be named, you can see that the author drew way more inspiration from The Handmaid's Tale, whether it was the book or the show. You can see that it has more heavier themes that go in line with The Handmaid's Tale. And I really like The Handmaid's Tale. I read the book, oh God, ages ago. And I've seen the first couple seasons of the show. Haven't finished it. I'm not ready for that much drama right now. But it's a really interesting story because of that. You know, I liked it. I think the ending was way too long, though. That epilogue could have easily just been 2 chapters. I felt like I couldn't breathe reading the epilogue. I felt like that dragged out so much. It could have easily just been 2 more chapters and then an epilogue. I didn't have the emotional reaction a lot of people did. I liked it. It was a good story. Definitely 4 stars. But I don't know. Maybe I just read too much. and books just don't affect me. And that's not true. In The Lives of Puppets, that book, like, makes me, like, want to cry. It's happiness. And Legends and Lattes just makes me feel, like, super cozy, and I just... But I don't know, there's something about this book that I wasn't really fully able to commit myself to giving it 5 stars. I do like the characterization, I like the character dynamics, I like the aspect of alchemy and how that is kind of their magic in this world. I think it's really, really interesting as far as the stories goes. I like how separated it is from that which will not be named. So I think it's just a good story. It has a lot of depth to it. It has a lot of growth, has a lot of characterization. It is very dark, you know, it is a war setting. It is very dark, but it's still a very good and thoughtful storytelling, you know, with the war. And I think it's also kind of relevant with the way the country is scarily going at the moment. I think it's just honestly worth the read. And again, this is coming from me, and this book was not on my TBR at all. I had absolutely no interest in reading it. In fact, I was like, ugh, really? I don't give a whole lot of stock into, like, the whole TikTok books nowadays, because I've been burned way too many times. I had no interest in reading Manacled at all. I was like, no, thank you. But again, Fairy Loot has yet to steer me wrong. And I was just like, you know what, this is actually a really good book. Part 2. The whole of part 2 was absolutely amazing, in my opinion. I just loved all of that. I couldn't read it fast enough. Part 1 and 3 were like, okay. But part 2, phenomenal. But the epilogue was too long. I think the book could have easily lost 200 pages and it still would have been more impactful. Maybe if not more so. And I think for me, personally, it has a lot of heavy themes to it, which is why it is a really good story. You know, it has a lot of heavy, dark themes to it. It is, again, a dark dark fantasy, I'm sorry. But I wish I could have had a deeper emotional connection to the book as a whole, and I just didn't, unfortunately. C'est la vie. But it was a good book. Definitely worth the read, especially for someone who had absolutely no desire to read it at all. But I read it for my friend's book club, and I ended up liking it. So, pleasantly surprised. In any case, thank you for tuning in. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, and share with all your book loving friends. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, happy reading.